Well, hello everybody, it's Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your critique of the week. It's Friday, October 24th. So glad you could join me, those who got the memo. We did this earlier. It's kind of a test to see who's paying attention. The critique of the week was listed. I didn't realize I had to do it early in time to mention it anywhere. It was like Tuesday. I realized, oh, shoot, I can't actually do it at the regular time. So we moved it up. I posted a few places. When I made the event things, it said the right time. But yeah, well, glad we got some people here, though. Great to see Shape of Soup is here. Kimberly Gibson Tran. We've got Katie Dozier, the next room over. If she didn't get the memo, that'd be difficult. Lisa Seidenberg is here. Let's see, Chelsea McClellan. Good to see you, Chelsea. Mary Keating is here. Okay, great. Lori Flanagan. Yeah, so doing it at a different time does allow some different people to come that usually can't make it live, which is always nice. Let's see. Well, it's earlier, so I've got my coffee still. I'm looking forward to enjoying some poems. If anybody's here who has a submission in the queue, let me know, and I'll let you go first. But as always, what we're going to do is go over poems, see what works, what doesn't, what we can do to make them better, talk about everything, talk about, as fine details as line breaks and certain word choices, to a lot more broad questions about how the poem lands, most often just what makes sense and what doesn't. So it's always a lot of fun to do that. If you'd like to submit to the Critique of the Week, all you have to do is go to rattle.com. Go up in the contents, and you'll find Critique of the Week in the drop-down menu. Submit 2 poems, and your poems will at some point, hopefully, be shared and discussed by this wonderful group of poets. And more are trickling in as they start to realize that we're on live right now. Maddie Faye is here. Gail Epps, good to see you. Lori Flanagan. Yeah, all right. Well, let's... does anybody have a submission in the queue right now? Let's see. Well, if not, if anybody does, let me know who is here. And if not, let's see. Yeah, well, that's okay. Yeah, let me see. Well, let's go. We'll start looking at the oldest poems really quick and see if anybody comes in. Yeah, Shape of Soup does have one. He has been done really recently. That was Michael Rolane. Let's see. Okay, so let's take a look at the oldest poems here, and we'll try to do some moving through quickly. So this first one is by Anika Zarin Chowdhury from a country that starts with PL, West Pomeranian. I wonder where this is. Let's see. I'm gonna search for the city. Oh, Poland. That's what PL is. Okay, great. So this is Anika Zarin Chowdhury from Poland, sharing a poem here. Pasted into the body. Yeah. Teresa Jackson says she's got one. Okay, yeah. Lavendula, hello. Welcome aboard. Glad you could be here. Since you're new here, yeah. So if you have any poems you'd like to have us discuss and talk about, please do send them to rattle.com/page/critique. You can find it there. Let's take a look first at this poem, though. This is To Learn Commenting, When Will I Rest? I guess the poem is just called When Will I Rest? It's pasted right into the body, so let's take a look. Here's the poem. It's kind of hard to fit. There we go. When will I rest? Oh, my body hurts. My bones feel like they're cracking, I whisper to myself. Just a little more sleep, that's all I want. But I'm a mom, so I sigh. Time to get up. The sun's barely up, and already I'm moving. Lunch is to pack, I remind myself. One for the kids, one for me. No time to sit. Let's go. I grab my bag and rush. The bus won't wait. Here, let me fix this a little bit. The bus won't wait, and work won't either. After hours of work, I still have a list. Groceries, can't forget those. I haul bags, my arms straining, heavy with all the day's weight. This is what they like, I remind myself as I push open the door. I barely step inside when the kids race in. Mom, we're starving. So I'm back in the kitchen. Snack time, okay. Crumbs fall, spills happen, I sweep, I clean, but dinner's next, no time to lean. Dinner's ready, I call out, exhausted but smiling. Plates are clean, the table's wiped, and I'm off to another task. Bath time, kids. My hands ache, but I help them in. Homework next. Let's finish up, I whisper with a tired smile. They're finally tucked in. Good night, sleep tight, I say with a kiss on each head. My husband finally comes home, but we're still not done. Just a few minutes to read, I wonder, reaching for a book I haven't touched in months. Then I see the laundry. Ironing first, I mutter. Once again, my quiet time slips away. They said life would be easier, I think, remembering what I'd heard. After school, after work, after marriage, motherhood will fill your heart, they'd said. But right now, I just want a moment to rest, just one little moment to be still. So definitely a poem. It's nice in the way that it sets us up to understand what's going on. Like, we're not lost at all whatsoever in this poem, and it's something we can all relate to too, I think. And not having time, time is difficult. Yeah. So what's missing in this poem are sort of the poetic elements. The lines that are memorable. Ways of describing things that are unique. And also the sense of a turn into something deeper. It's written about, it finishes in the same place it started, I guess, is the main thing. But definitely a great thing to write about, a great topic. But there's got to be something underneath. When will I rest is the question that opens up. And then we have the whole poem run through, and then we end up with, I just need some rest, which is a thought. It's sort of, I need a little more time to rest. I want to write a poem about that. It's sort of like the instigating thought. And then we end up in the same place too. So it's a poem that enacts that, but doesn't go that deeper step into the subconscious, into that creative space where we're, Katie and I in bed were reading Jung not too long ago, talking about how, the interpretation of dreams and how dreams are never about what they're about. And a poem should never be about what it's about. It's about something deeper than what it's initially about. That instigating thing, that symbolic thing you're talking about is really just the surface level. That's like the medium for the subconscious deeper thing to come out through. And so that's the problem, that the poem just has that surface level of what was originally thought about, and there's no surprise there. And so the poem is ultimately, it ends up being unsatisfying, even though, like so often, poems miss, we don't have the context, we don't know what they're actually about, we're lost in them. We're not lost in this one, we know it's about, but it doesn't push deeper. And so that's what we got to do, push deeper and surprise yourself, find a way to do that. Yeah. And then too, the poetic elements as well. Rachel Grieve says, "What's the line between a poem and a narrative in prose?" Yeah. And Kimberly Gibson Tran points out, interesting in the poem is dialogue heavy. Wish there was a bit more music here. Yeah, exactly. So we need to have the poem and have more, visuals, have more focus on the language, so the poem sings to us. A poem is a dance in your mouth. And the poem doesn't really, this one doesn't feel like it's dancing yet. So my advice, I think it's a great start for diving into poetry. Read a lot more poetry and dig deeper into the subject matter. Like, what really is it? Is there something more than just saying, I'm too busy? Is there a regret there? Motherhood will fill your heart, they'd said, but right now I just want a moment. Is there something there underneath that we haven't talked about yet? Yeah, as Kimberly Gibson Tran says, it would be nice if the speaker had one slow moment of reflection, maybe while sitting alone on the toilet, fixating on the rubber ducky in the tub, a moment of revelation. Yeah, exactly. That moment, some place we can slow down and think. And notice how even in this comment, Kimberly Gibson Tran says, maybe a moment while sitting alone on the toilet, fixating on the rubber ducky in the tub. See how much detail was involved in just that comment, and a whole scene and a whole thing springs to life when we have that image. And the poem, it doesn't really have those kinds of images. It doesn't have that kind of thing where we're set into the scene. We sort of rush through the dialogue, but we don't really dive in. So there's that too. And there's opportunities. Crumbs fall, spills happen, I sweep, I clean. We could, how see how quickly that moves through that description? and how we don't linger on any kind of image. Crumbs fall, spills happen, the cereal spreads out like a constellation of stars in the shape of this. We could go on and on about how that spill looks, and then we would start to enter the poem and really lose ourselves in it. And then once we do that, we feel a deeper connection. And so have those sense of details coming in too. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, Lisa Seidenberg says a fantasy moment, maybe. And that's, yeah. So what I was talking about before about going deeper, it's like a sense of the poem moves somewhere. It changes the place where the speaker is. And there's a lot of ways to do it. It can go to flashbacks in memory. It can go to deeper revelations about the self. It can go to future fantasy and imagination, like Lisa Seidenberg suggests. But let's go somewhere. Let's not start in the same place where we began. It's like, how unsatisfying would it be if an airplane took off and then landed at the same airport and you're like, okay, we're here, and you were already there. That's kind of what a lot of poems feel like. They should go to a destination. All right, let's move on. Thanks for sharing that. And who was it that had a poem? Let me see. Yeah, there's a second poem too, I should say too, from Annika Zarin Chowdhury, and similar things. I'm just going to say, instead of reading it, more detail. Go somewhere with the poem, and just read more and dive more into the self and what you're talking about. Okay, I think it was Teresa who said she had. Where was it? Teresa Jackson? Is that the right name? Let's see. There it is, Teresa Jackson. I think I do. Okay. Let's see if Teresa's poem is here. Yep. 2 possible for review. Teresa sent them in last month, exactly a month ago, September 24th. Teresa's from Pennsylvania. It looks like a short poem and an even shorter poem. Well, that's always fun. We do like concision. We like poems that don't take up a lot of our time, yeah. Okay. Well, here we go. This is, and let me ask if Teresa has any general questions. Generally curious about the strength, clarity, and potential relatability of the pieces. Even if one of my pieces is critiqued, I just want to thank the team at Rattle for creating the space for feedback. Well, definitely our pleasure. Yeah. Okay, let's take a look at these though. Dog is the first one. Here we go. Dog, and see, this is the whole poem. Very short. Dog. Before I had a dog, I thought I would hate the sound of its nails clacking across the wood floor like aggressive typing on a keyboard. But now I smile at the sound of my dog trotting through the house, completing his doggy to-do list, living his life. So that's a cute poem. I do like the, you can compare to the last poem. It comes to life a little bit with the description, that specific detail of the nails clacking across the floor like aggressive typing on a keyboard. And then I think it's really cute to go to the doggy to-do list too. I think that's fun place to go with it. So it's definitely an amusing poem. Thanks for sharing this. One thing I would say off the bat, I think there's an opportunity to go do more with this. Typing on a keyboard is a bit cliche. It's not quite, but it's sort of like the first thing you would think of when you hear the sound of the dog. And I think if we could either keep that and then go deeper into that by explaining the sound a little more, like it's like an opportunity to have like a little run of like metaphors for how, because the poem is really just about the sound and about how that transforms for the speaker into something positive after having a dog. And so if we can like linger on that sound a little bit more, I think the poem would come to life a little bit more. And so you could say, across the wood floor, like aggressive typing on a keyboard, and then keep describing the typing or like what somebody might do or what they're typing, or you could extend it that way, or go to a totally different metaphor for the sound, like what else does it sound like? And I think that would make this poem come to life a little more. As Kimberly Gibson Tran is saying right now, it would be nice if the title gave us a little more, even sound of the dog. Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder too, since we're going in like a cute place, I wonder, his doggy to-do list, I get the same kind of feeling. Yeah, Kimberly Gibson Francis might like to hear more sounds of the dog too. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I like how tight and concise the poem is, so I wouldn't want to expand it much unless we really, go into a new, surprising direction. But I think just another line or two on both of these stanzas might help. Yeah. Yeah. So like his doggy to-do list. I kind of. What if you said like living his doggy life and just repeating that? But what else is he doing? I don't know. I think we could just expand the poem a little bit. But I do. I think it's charming. Kimberly Gibson Trent says, or should we boil this poem down to its one image, a haiku? Laurie Flanagan says, turn the keyboard into a musical keyboard now that you own him. Yeah. And there's just a lot of ways you could go. And I like how tight and concise the poem is. Yeah. Mary King likes the doggy to-do list. Yeah, I think, we looked at, or we tried to look at, let's see. Last week there was a poem, and actually the reason why I couldn't find it, remember if you watched last week, I was trying to think of this poem that was a short, tight, concise poem, and it was called, the poet called it Hands, like the former poem, because it was 5 lines, and what happened, I couldn't find it actually, I found out later, is because I was conflating the 2 poems of his that we published. So let me show you how these poems are running. This is Jose Angel Araguz. This is from Rattle 28. And so the poem Gloves isn't actually the hand poem, which is what's confusing to me in my memory. But this is the poem I was thinking about, Gloves. And let me just read this one and read the other one. And we'll talk about how to make poems nice and tight and concise. Okay? So this is Gloves from Rattle number 28. I made up a story for myself once, that each glove I lost was sent to my father in prison. That's all it would take for him to chart my growth without pictures, without words or visits, only colors and design, texture. It was okay then for skin to chafe and ash, to imagine him trying on a glove, stretching it out, my open palm closing and disappearing in his fist. And so feel how, in this poem, it's a really, really tight, brief, concise story. But we get the emotional feel of it, and then we end on that image, which can linger and stick with us. So the poem is called Gloves, and we end on that my palm opening and closing in his fist. And it's a beautiful thing to think about. Yeah. Yeah, and so, but notice how, so you get the emotion by saying, I made up a story for myself once. And the fact that it's a made-up story, so that provides a really good frame, too, which is one of the reasons why the poem works so well. We already get to this sort of, it's a sad fantasy if I'm making up this story. And then it's that each glove I lost was sent to my father in prison. So we have a whole possible... this whole story is like laid out before us just in those 3 lines. And then all we do, we have that story, and then we focus on the image. And just that bit of story, that context, plus the emotionally laden symbolic image is all it takes to make a beautiful poem. So that's all it would take for him to chart my growth without pictures, without words or visits, only the colors and design, texture. It was okay then for skin to chafe and ash, to imagine him trying on a glove, stretching it out, my open palm closing and disappearing in his fist. So it's a great way to do a short poem. And I think this poem that we were looking at before can do that same kind of thing. The other one this is the one he calls a hand. Because there's 5 lines, so like 5 fingers. This is another one, Abandoned Church. Again, Jose Angel Araguz. Abandoned Church. The men on the steps grow quiet, and together turn their heads when a woman passes, her dress rising like a hand pointing the way. So again, just the image has so much power that you can have a 5-line poem that is just some context with an image, and then our brains really fill in so much that it really is a moving and pleasurable experience. And so if you just think of a poem, a short poem, as context with an image, and then us, the readers, filling in the gap, that's one way to do it. That really works, especially for short poems. And so if we compare that to dog, and we were talking about a short poem last week too, and that's why those came up. And so this has a very similar structure. The difference is it doesn't have that like really hard-hitting image at the end that makes you linger. So how do we add that? And that's the real question, to make this from an amusing, entertaining, like delightful poem to something that really sticks with you. And it's having that, that ending. Now I smile at the sound of my dog trotting through the house, completing his doggy to-do list, which is great. Living his life just doesn't have that. Like, you got to find like that one image at the end that just makes the whole thing stick with you, like that glove opening and closing in his fist, or the hand, So that's the thing to look for in this poem to really raise it to the next level. Because right now it's nice. It's nicely laid out for a short poem. It's really great. Okay. Next up, it's a second poem, even shorter. This is a tiny poem by Teresa Jackson, Mischievous. You end up being mean, even if that wasn't what you meant. Mischievous. You end up being mean, even if that wasn't what you meant. So that's really interesting. So one of the things, one of the things I've always tried to do, or try to find or think of, is a poem that works completely devoid of imagery. It's really hard to do. And it's something that you don't see, you can't find. It's hard to think of an example. The only great poem I can think of that comes close is that Cavafy poem, The Great No. And we've talked about this before, but this one, comes close too. But still, even so, there's a reason why it's so hard to not have a poem that has images. Is because even though there's a really nice idea here, it's really concisely said, this epigrammatic type way. There's something there. There needs to be something to tie the emotion to. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just reading some of the comments. But so I think I might have even shared this poem last time. But what was it was from our Appalachian Poets issue, and all it did was have a feeling and a little emotion too. Or a little image too. Here's this tiny poem, and I might have shared this last week when I was trying to think of short poems. It's interesting, the same thing kind of came up again. But this is Hannah Bonner with the website. It's maybe we'll get like this. And when he told her it was truly over this time. So here we get the title telling the whole situation. He told her it was truly over. We know what that means, so we know where we are. Then we have the image. He looked at her like November light flung long across a porch. And feel how the light flung long, how that lingers in your mind. And then that hold is like a container for this emotion that you can relate to, and you know the context. And so you get a whole lot out of these two lines. And it's because you have this great image here. And so, again, the question is, you end up being mean, even if that wasn't what you meant. Some kind of image there to symbolically show that. And I think that would really, really make this poem take off too. So I guess for both poems, Teresa, the thing is, the thing that's missing is that sense of that just that last image that we can hold to, So, yeah. Okay, well, let's move on. But thanks for sharing that. It's great, and I love. I really love nice, concise, tight poems. They're really fun to read. They don't ask much of your time, and then they can give so much. Yeah. Okay. Hey, yeah, Nancy Sabanik is here. Yeah, we got more people coming in as they realize we're doing it early. Yeah, my daughter's in a play, the school play tonight, which is why we got some stuff picking her up early and stuff like that. So gotta go do that. Let's see. Now we're gonna go back to the oldest poems in the queue once again. Let me just make that work. And the oldest we're still back in March. We're gonna have to figure something out because we got too many piling up. But this one is by Candace Kavanaugh from California, Southern California. No general questions, so we'll just take a peek at these poems. You gotta make it a little larger so we can see it. Okay. Here we go. Need this. There we go. Aunt Sarah and Mama. If it's true we're not meant to be saved, then their lives were full to cracking. Wisteria vines along the porch, dusk in the hallway, quiet talk in the kitchen, giddy hugs, cotton print dresses over layers of shadows, unraveling seams of graciousness, ladies of magnolia touched by human hands turned brown and spotted, soiled blooms trail grace by the root, find rest in the seeds of behind the hand grins of two-edged one-liners. Southern girls grew up to be funny women who were not the sort you hug from the front, who gave their children broken verses. So that's the first one. That was Aunt Sarah and Mama. Yeah. Kimberly Gibson Tran says, interesting to list Aunt Sarah first in the title. Yeah, that is. And also suggests cutting graciousness. Yeah, so there are a lot more image and detail going on in this poem than the first few we've seen. And that brings the poem to life a little bit. So Aunt Sarah and Mama. If it's true we are not meant to be saved, then their lives were full to cracking. And I think there's a nice mystery to that opening. We know what it's about. We know it's about Aunt Sarah and Mama. And then so we have that established. And if it's true we are not meant to be saved, I assume that's a religious savior, but I don't really know. And then their lives were full to cracking, which is an interesting way to put that. And it makes me curious to read more. And so I think it's a really great introduction to the poem. Wisteria vines along the porch, dusk in the hallway, quiet talk in the kitchen, giddy hugs, cotton print dresses over layers of shadow, unraveling seams of graciousness. Yeah, the seams of graciousness makes the image abstract. I agree with Kimberly to cut that. I think as much as we establish some mystery and interest with this first stanza, the details here, it lingers too long without contributing to that mystery or revealing that mystery. It just sort of, the images sit there. And so even though it's starting to paint a scene, they're not like progressing the plot forward. And so I think it ends up being too long before something happens. Like already I'm feeling that. Like move on, let's move forward. Why are we being shown this? Even though they're nice images, that's what I'm thinking in this section. Ladies of magnolia, touched by human hands, turn brown and spotted. And this brings back the mystery to me a little bit because I don't really understand what ladies of magnolia are, but it's enough that I'm curious. Ladies of magnolia, touched by human hands, turn brown and spotted. Is that the blossoms? So if you touch a magnolia blossom, it turns into a brown spot from like our oils in our hands. Is that what happens and what it's saying, I think? Soiled blooms trail grace by the root, find rest in the seeds of behind the hand grins. So behind the hand grins. two-edged one-liners. So I'm really starting to get lost about, how this relates, how this Aunt Sarah and Mama, the ladies, their lives were full to cracking. How this applies to the images we're showing doesn't really work. Yeah. And Shape of Soup says it's a bit like the imagery is trying to prove something instead of just showing. Yeah. Yeah. And Rachel Grief says a little bit more about why they're like this. Differentiate the two. Yeah, Kimberly Gibson Trent says, I think this poem is about Southern women and secrets. Yeah, it's just, it gets bogged down, even though we always are calling for more imagery. It's like the right level of imagery. And the right, it has to be functioning. It has to be doing something. And here I feel like it's stretched out too long and not like connecting to what the topic is clearly enough that we can really follow. So Ladies of Magnolia, I think too, are Southern women. I think that's what we're talking about. Southern girls who grew up to be funny women, who are not the sort you hug from the front, who gave their children broken verses. And then it just ends too. And so I really think it's an interesting start to a poem, and it feels like in the process of trying to write the poem, and this is something that you feel and happens fairly often, reading poems that are just, regular submissions, not ready to go, is that they almost like get scared of what direction they were heading into and then sort of run away from their actual subject. And I think, for this one, it starts out so strong, talking about Sarah and Mama, and this, give us the actual details of them. It feels like we're sort of, the speaker's afraid to actually go there, go to the actual details and share the actual story that they're being driven to write about. And so there's like this impulse there to start the poem. And then, as Lisa Seidmark says, the poem doesn't address the idea of being saved or not. Yeah, exactly. Kimberly Gibson Tran puts it this way: each stanza needs to reveal a piece of the secret, make it one secret unraveling at this gathering. Yeah. And so I think this one is just one of those, tell the story, like don't let it go. I want to know, I'm here reading. You've brought me to the table. You're telling me the story about Aunt Sarah and Mama. I want to know about Aunt Sarah and Mama. The abstractions of them being like the vines, I want to really know. I want to know why they're not meant to be saved. I want to know why their lives were full to the cracking. You get some of that with they grew up to be funny women, but like show some of that. Like I just want to get to know these people. I want it to be more of like a character sketch. And then I want the feelings that they give you to come out on the page. And it feels like that's what's being run away from here. So great start to the poem. Just develop it more. Go deeper into what it is. Yeah. Okay, let's take a look at the other one too. And this is a little harder to fit on the screen. So let's see, because it's a prose poem. Let me and this is an ekphrastic poem from let's see, from it's just so big. Okay, here we go. An ekphrastic poem on the Sin by Frank von Stuck called Molting. And again, the poet was Candace Kavanaugh. And we're going to read, maybe I'll look up the piece later, but let's just read the poem first. Molting. The painting is of a woman. She looks out from shadows, her breasts and belly bare. A python wraps around her waist, arm and shoulder, its head languid beside her throat. There is no hiding here, only shadow, pale flesh, two pairs of eyes gazing, unblinking. Restless to shed this tight skin of my life, I would be willing to peel away the scales of my shame. I would leave it dry and curled at my feet, evidence of fragile forward motion. I would be willing to endure blindness for the sake of bright, shiny, slimy birth. I would be willing to slide myself around the exposed body of a shadowed woman and rest my head at her throat. Yeah. So So this one, I think this displays, and I don't think we need to see the image. It's really described well. Ekphrastus means description. So originally, Ekphrastus writing was just describing paintings, and it became, added into what we do with art now, which is reveal hidden truths. But it shows how that operates really well in ekphrastic poetry, because you can start just by describing the piece, and then what you're drawn to, not even of your own volition, what your attention goes to, stirs up emotions. Then you can try to figure out, get to the bottom of where those emotions come from, and play with your own reaction to the painting that you in the process of describing. So it gets the images out up front. It starts to paint a scene that we can enter, like we talk about so much. And I think it shows why ekphrastic poetry works. Now, for this, I think there's a few places, especially where Kimberly Gibson Trent says this is a cool poem. I like the snaky imagery. I like that too. There's a little bit of a clutter to this poem, a little bit of like the poet sort of intruding on themselves, trying to make it sound poetic. And so there's some things I would cut. The painting is of a woman. Somebody said just start with a woman, I think. And I think you could do that too, because we know it's an ekphrastic poem. We know it's going to be some kind of piece of art, so we can just describe it without that extra remove within the voice. So I kind of agree. You just say, a woman looks out from shadows, her breasts and belly bare. A python wraps around her waist, arm, and shoulder. Its head languid beside her throat. That languid word is one of those words that you just don't see unless it's somebody trying to be poety. It's not a word we really use much outside of poetry. And so I would sort of use a different word there, because it's not like it's a poem full of that type of language. There is no hiding here. And I like that transition a lot. So we describe what's going on, and then we interject our own interpretation. There is no hiding here. And a really simple declarative statement, which is great. I think that's really a sense of what, if you ask like what a turn or what a volta is, or, what a sense of movement in a poem is, it's that. It's like I have this one thing I'm observing and describing, and then I'm making this declarative statement. There is no hiding here. And it's a really great cut to do it that way. There is no hiding here, only shadow, pale flesh. Pale flesh is got kind of cliche. I'd like to have this described better. And two pairs of eyes gazing, unblinking. I think there's an opportunity at this point to describe the eyes a little bit, if you can do it in a fresh way, to make, because really the gaze is so important to how we feel about the painting, and it's really not described. And I think the poem would be better if we described it a little bit. Restless to shed this tight skin of my life, I would be willing to peel away the scales of my shame. I think the restless to shed the tight skin of my life, I think that's just a little too much. I think we can get this line a lot more concise. It's sort of repeating itself, I guess, is the thing. Because I think just I would be peeling away, or be willing to peel away the scales of my shame. I think that's enough of a statement. I would leave it dry and curled at my feet. So I like this going into the imagination now. I would leave it dry and curled at my feet. There's one thing I was thinking about. There was a long time ago I watched, and I guess it was Katie was talking about, she was watching a master class on body language. And I watched some body language lecture like many, many years ago. And they were analyzing just this video. And there's a way, she was saying that if the eyes look up in one direction, it goes to memory. And if it looks up in the other direction, it goes to imagination. And it's fascinating in this thing we always talk about with the right and the left brain, and how those have two different motivations and drives and ways of seeing the world. And really what we're doing is bridging the two, making something that can cross that gap. And that's where the electric happens and spark of a poem. But you can feel it in a poem like this, that movement and posture and like body language and the eyes accessing memory versus accessing imagination. Those are the shifts that we want to see in poems. And they're really clear in this one, because you can see that I would leave it dry and curled at my feet, evidence of fragile forward motion. You can see the imagination moving to that, and it's really nice. And those are the kind of things. Like we almost have this like tapestry of experience in front of us, and we're looking at different operating within it, you know? But anyway, I would be willing to endure blindness for the sake of bright, shiny, slimy birth. So the bright, shiny, slimy birth, those kind of adjectives are a weaker way to describe things. Like we want to describe things through metaphor, through direct description, not adjectives. And so it just ends up being kind of weak and a bit trite. At that point, we can just do better, describing it better that way. Even though I like the concept. I would be willing to slide myself around the exposed body of a shadowed woman and rest my head on her throat. And I think that's a really great last line too. So I like that. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, anyway, I think that's so. This is one of those poems. I think it works really well, and it's just a matter of like tightening up and staying in the poet space. Let's take a look at what this painting actually, just because I'm curious. So the painting is here. Right here. So those are the eyes that we could describe. Yeah, it's a very, very provocative painting, I'd say. That snake especially, but the eyes too. Like notice those, the two pairs of eyes. We could really get into that description, I think. And I think that would make the poem come to life all the more. Okay, well, thanks for sharing those. That was two from, where'd we go? Two from Candace Kavanaugh. Moving right along. Finally, I think, into April. No, we're still in March. This is Sammy Bellin with two poems here. Winter Sickness, sort of a one-pager, and another typical one-page, sort of relatively concise couplets. This is Sammy Bellin from Pennsylvania, second poet from Pennsylvania this week. Maybe you guys can get together and start a writing group. Anyway, here we go. Winter Sickness. Oh, let me see if there were any questions. I forgot to check. Oh, no questions. Okay, here we go. Winter Sickness. Dirty windows stained with gray splotches block out the frigid light. There are ravens in my skull pleading for any spare corn in loose pockets. Scoundrels relentless in the thickets and narrow corridors tapping away. A frozen sluice runs down the marrow tubes, surfing beneath hoarfrost patches on tundra skin. No amount of artificial sun can breathe life into this stiff hand. Blue light staring at words still thawing out. No wonder they continue to spin and meander along like club-footed penguins searching for morsels upon the ice. Premonitions of tepid winter and early spring die clutching their crystal ball, phlegm blocking all airways, coated like tar throttling a smoker's lungs. I feel weightless, a red helium balloon, brittle to the wicker touch of straw. Nausea as a dear friend visiting this flooded ranch collapse. This flooded ranch collapses the ultimate death for a burning star, and warmth has been hard to come around these venomous days. So Winter Sickness. So there's some really great language and music in this poem. You know, that first poem that had that lack of music that we mentioned. This is what we're talking about when we talk about music. Kevin Gibson translates, I can hear the throttling of smokers young. Yeah, it's a great use of the word there. Some great diction. I'm having difficulty sort of connecting enough to care about the topic, which is the difficulty for me here. There's some really nice lines. There's some good images. But the speaker, good pacing, says shape of soup, could be tightened a bit. But not knowing, it's one of those things where if this was part of a longer book where I knew some kind of progression of what was going on, I would feel engaged and connected to it possibly. But here it's sort of, Rachel Grief says it's a very claustrophobic poem, which seems to be the intention. Mary Keating loves the second stanza. There's a lot to like. It's just difficult for me without any sense of what's going on to have any investment in it, personally. Kimberly Gibson Tran says, the first two lines aren't giving much, feel like cliched images. Why not just start with there are ravens in my skull? I agree that's a great first line. I would start there. And then two, I think if we got rid of both the title and something better with the title, and then dirty windows stained with gray splotches block out the floodlight. Just get rid of that. Start with there are ravens in my skull, and have the title sort of give us some sense of the context. And if we did that, then we would have a sort of a feel of grounding, something to hold on to while we go on this journey through the interesting language and lines, and we'd have a place to sort of feel that emotion. As Nancy Sabanek says, need a story to complement the imagery. And so what could we say if this was if this was the winter in which such and such happened, and we called it that, just to provide some kind of context. Instead of winter sickness, it was whatever instigated this feeling, whatever happened right before. If we got a sense of that, then we would just care more, So, just think about a previous poem that we already saw today. What if it was the winter after you left? Just as a generic placeholder. But imagine it said that. The winter after you left. There are ravens in my skull, pleading for any spare corn and loose pockets, scoundrels relentlessly in the thickets and narrow corridors, tap, tap, tapping away. Feel how we actually feel that just by having some sense of a context. We feel those lines a lot more, even though they're the same lines. They're just as strong, individually isolated either way, but we don't have a connection to it, so we don't feel. But if we have that context, then we start to actually feel it. A frozen sleuth runs down the marrow tubes, surfing beneath hoarfrost patches on tundra skin. I think the surfing feels a little bit off, just because the imagery is so so wintry and so frozen and cold, and the surfing evokes the wrong kind of thing. So I think it's just the wrong, even though it's interesting, it's the wrong verb. Unless we go through and do something else with that too and extend that. But otherwise, it just feels like it's a misplaced word there. It doesn't match the kigo of the poem, let's say. But anyway, surfing beneath hoarfrost patches on tundra skin. Also, if you're this is a hyphen, not a dash, and you really want to make sure if you don't have a way to make an M dash on your keyboard or whatever, just do two hyphens in a row at least, so we can see the difference. It makes it really hard to read because they're totally different punctuations. A hyphen connects two words together. A dash connects two thoughts together. And when you're reading and they're replaced, you don't know which one's which. It makes it a little difficult to read. So just make sure you actually use the proper M dash. It's got to be longer than that. It's got to be longer than a hyphen. Anyway, no amount of artificial sun can breathe life into the stiff hand. So the artificial sun breathe. This line's a little clunky. It's one of the few ones that feels a little forced. Blue light staring at words still thawing out. I think that whole couplet doesn't really do much for me. It's not adding as much as the other things did. It doesn't have as much vividness or intensity. No wonder they continue to spin. So I guess they're the words, spinning, yeah. No wonder they continue to spin and meander along like club-footed penguins searching for morsels upon the ice. So I like that. That's a nice nice image there. Premonitions of tepid winter and early spring die clutching their crystal ball. Whose premonitions, though? I mean, I think this starts to feel like a little redundant. Phlegm blocking all airways, coated like tar throttling a smoker's lungs. That's a great line. I feel weightless, a red helium balloon brittle to the wicker touch of straw. Nausea as a dear friend visiting this flood ranch. Collapse is the ultimate death for a burning star. I don't know. I think we're getting a little too vague and distant in a way. If we knew the topic and the topic was something where that made sense, but tying it all to the death of a burning star, who would be the burning star? I guess is the problem. It's sort of hard, and then we end on hard to come around these venomous days. Why are the days venomous? So without that context, it's really hard to appreciate the end. Let's see. Where was Oh, Shape of Soup says there are ravens in my skull. It should be the title. Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, that might be nice. Yeah. So maybe that's a way to go, with having that be the title. There are ravens in my skull. And then we jump in pleading for any spare corn and loose pockets. Yeah. But I think it's still a poem, for all its strengths, it's still like sort of in search of its ending too. Kimberly Gibson it was Mary Keating says about having the flu. Is it? So the venomous days are like the actual flu? Tar throttling? I don't know. If we knew that, maybe it would work better. But I just don't really know what it's about. And then so having some kind of conclusion that feels satisfying, like I've gone somewhere and learned something, is hard to come by when I don't really know the context. Okay, well, I think that's about it for Winter Sickness. Let's take a look at the other poem. And this, once again, the poet is Sammy Bellin from Pennsylvania. Self-Admonishment Roadkill is poem number 2. Here we go. The stomach is swollen around the skull, intruding. An early Bacon sketch, its viewership eager and appalled. The tripartite carcass barely remains. Oil drum half melted, a partial find in the black gum pits of La Brea. Dude, it's just fun to read. I like it. The butcher back for bits bites his fat tongue, too afraid to cry out, curdled in asphalt hell. Among the prostrate squirrel and genuflecting fox, will you scalp his antlers, like a court jester sawing the clefted points off a crown? Do you deal death and let free your sticky maggots like grasping children? Coward, you are less than the crow who watches your chrome-plated death with worm breath and avarice. And so again, the problem is beautiful language, really nice lines. It's fun to say out loud because there's a sense of music to it. There's a lot of detail. It's a rich kind of textured language to it. I love things like in the gum black pits of La Brea. It's like fun to say, just like right now, wherever you are, say that out loud. In the gum black pits of La Brea. If you don't like saying that, you don't like poetry. You know, we have that poem. Maybe we'll close out by reading it by Lynn Knight about the word Adirondack and how the word Adirondack made her love poetry. And it, you know, that there's some phrases just so fun to say. And if you like saying it, you're a poet, you know? And so that's got that there. But the problem is I don't have enough context to care about the poem ultimately. And it's because who is the you? Your chrome-plated death with the worm breath and advert. You know, who you are less than the crow who watches your chrome-plated death. So whose death is chrome-plated? And suddenly I'm imagining like that last scene of in the Terminator, the original Terminator movie, where it's like being lowered into the molten lava is like a robot being lowered into La Brea tar pit. I'm not sure. Yeah, as Rachel Grief says, the same thing as the last poem. The images are great, but it's a kind of a string of images. Yeah. So similar. So just how to make it connect. Kimberly Gibson Tran says something beautifully bitter and Plath-like in several lines, but we need to have more picture of the poem's occasion. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Look at a Sylvia Plath poem. It is a great comp. You know, Sylvia Plath has the same kind of just love of this really rich language that's a little off, but drives the poem forward through imagery. But then you always sort of know where you are, you know? And I think that's what's missing here is the sense of what we're actually talking about and like why it should matter. And so the same advice as last time, like put that in the title. Yeah, Desi Cochrane says a string of images can work. Ground us first, maybe title could do it. That's what we say very often. Self-admonishment, roadkill. Is this actual roadkill? And why is it self-admonishment? I mean, that's almost like telling us enough. And I kind of forgot about the title because it's a little bit forgettable. But so the roadkill is self-admonishing. So the you is the car that kill. I'm just having trouble wrapping my brain around it. Yeah, Kimberly Gibson Tran puts it this way. In Plath, we have a lens to interpret the tragic psychological landscape of her poems. Yeah, the lens, exactly. Mary Keating says, I think the you is the butcher. Yeah, we're just sort of, if we just knew, we would care. Like, we just need that little bit of sense of, like, who's talking to who. And then we care so much more. Images just don't have the feeling unless it's like there's this, like, potential energy, like a battery cell. It's just, like, full of, the ions being separated, and they want to be together, but you need the circuit connecting it. And without that connection, there's no actual electricity. There's no movement. There's no spark unless you make that connection. And that's what the context does. You need something to complete the circuit so we can feel the emotion of that. And that's what's missing in both these poems. And we can have, Rachel Greaves got an interpretation. Someone else did too. I think Mary Keating. Yeah. Sheva Su puts it this way, don't force interpretive work upon the reader. Yeah, it just let us know. Like, we want to know. We want to enjoy this. We want to feel from it, but we just need the context. Let me do it. We'll see if we can do another one quickly. Let's see. Next up we have, if this is short, we'll do it. Yeah. Too short. Snow Ballad and Boat Reflections. Micah Burgone from Wisconsin. And again, no questions. Just throwing these out there. Take a look. This one, it's in the title in the document. Boat Reflections. There's a boat among the shrubbery, an old boat we can see, a boat whose cracking and weathered paint speaks years of use to me. Oh, I like that. I didn't expect the rhyme. The skies are filled with fathomless gray, the clouds let slip no ray. The world is neither dark nor shining on this, a thoughtful day. How came this boat to lie dormant here with the waters so near? Why was this boat left and abandoned away from shed and pier? So close to the water does it lie, uncovered to the sky, unable ever to reach the tide, unable ever to fly. So there's a nice sense of rhythm. The poem is being guided by the rhyme too much. I say this all the time, but if you're writing poems that rhyme, never go to the first rhyme you think of, because that's the first rhyme the reader's going to think of. It's the first rhyme that sort of spontaneously pops in your head. It's the biggest connection you already have between those two words. And so when you go, gray day, when you go sky fly, there's no surprise for the reader there, but it's even worse than that, because it's not accessing the subconscious. It's deep to talk about, but it's the truth of it. We have the one brain that has all these structures and things that are already connected. And what poetry is doing is adding to that and making our lives and our understandings, our models of the world more rich. And if you go to the first rhyme you see, not only does it feel stale and trite and simple and easy, but it also doesn't go deeper into a surprising place that helps us learn more about our experience. And so, so find surprising rhymes is the first thing, and then use and gem. And it's so rare to have a poem that rhymes and that doesn't have that has all end stops. Where the rhyme ends on the last line and a full stop, and doesn't feel like a sing-songy nursery rhyme that just bores us to tears eventually. The whole point of the music in poetry, and especially formal poetry, but really everywhere, is that it sets up expectation and then slightly subverts that expectation and plays around with what we're expecting. And when you have poems with no enjambment and they rhyme, they just go right where you think every time, and it ends up being boring. And as Shape of Soup puts it, surface rhymes keep the reader trapped in the language. Exactly. And so if you look at something, Robert Frost, probably a poet you like, writing a poem like this. Look at what Frost actually does with the ends of lines and how it's surprising rhymes. As A.E. Stalling says, it's important to rhyme across parts of speech, rhyme nouns with verbs, with adjectives, with articles, surprise us with a rhyme and use enjambment. And if you look in depth at a poem, by Robert Frost, let's see, Robert Frost. Let me find out not like the road less traveled by or whatever, but there we go. Here's the lockless door. This is from courtesy of Reddit. Okay. Just a random frost poem. The lockless door. It went many years, but at last came a knock, and I thought the door with no lock to lock. I blew out the light, I tiptoed the floor, and raised both hands in prayer to the door. Do you feel how we have, so he's setting up the rhythm of, we do have these end stops, but then the enjambment after hands. Do you feel how satisfying that is that we don't stop there? And raised both hands in prayer to the door. It's probably not the best example because he's repeating himself a lot in this one intentionally, but still. But the knock comes again, my window was wide, I climb in the sill, and descend outside. Back over the sill, I bade come in to whatever the knock at the door may have been. And so we hear come in, bin, that's that slant rhyme there. So it's varying that a little bit. So at a knock, I emptied my cage to hide in the world and alter with age. There you go. So just that little bit of variation makes the poem come to life so much more. Even this is not the best example because he's repeating himself tons. And I didn't want to do... we could look at instead. I can't do that. No, sorry. Well, we'll just move on. But that's the point. We want to have variation within our poems and not be sing-songy. And probably the other one is similar, but we'll take a look. Because generally that's why we look at two poems. It's usually the same kind of issues going on. And this one is called Snow Ballad. Up above, the clouds are dark. Here below, the world seems stark. Wind relentless as it blows, at last brings the winter snows. Like an army from the skies, stretching beyond range of eyes, so the snow falls all around, covering the trees and ground. So it's doing the same thing. It's having that. There's not enough surprise. I love the poet. You love language. I love formal poetry. I wish there was more formal poetry written, but it's not about getting the same structure down over and over and over again. It's about setting up the structure and then slightly changing it and varying it so we get to move around and play within that. It's like you think, formal poetry, you can imagine it like a ladder. And we have these like rungs of a ladder that are really regularly spaced. But the beauty of it is the way someone flows as they're climbing up the ladder and moving around and stepping differently and making it a kind of dance as you climb this ladder of the poem. And if it's just the same steps monotonously over and over again, we get bored really fast. So vary it up, mix it up. Okay. And really that'll make your poems come to life too, because by forcing yourself into surprising places and tradition and different ways of saying surprising rhymes, you'll find that you think of things that you didn't really know why that word came up. And it turns out that that's the thing that you were really writing about. And that's really how you use formal poetry to access the subconscious creative part of your being that wants to speak and can't. And that's really why we use so much of the structures of poetry are ways of distracting your mind, giving yourself something to play with so that your subconscious can emerge. And that's where the creative fruits really come from. So focus on that, and the poems will really start to take off. But I love that you're using meter and rhyme, and I hope you continue. All right, and those are two poems from Micah Burgoyne from Wisconsin. And as promised, let's close out with this poem just for fun by Lynn Knight. It's the 20-year workshop. So why not? Here we go. Did I mess that up? Oh, yeah, here we go. Okay, the 20-year workshop. It was one of our favorite poets, Lynn Knight. She won the Rattle Poetry Prize in 2006, I think, way back there. This is a more recent poem, The 20-Year Workshop. I love hearing the guy on the local station in the small town where I lived for 20 years, here in the foothills of the Adirondacks. I was trying to become a poet, and I thought everything I heard could become a poem if I could figure out how to make use of it. The way frontierswomen made use of berries for dyes or stones for doorstops, if doors were there at all. And by then I'd be far off in Kansas, the sun blinding me, the old mule dying of thirst in the drought, my own lips so swollen and cracked I could barely speak, my children woeful at the table. Then Oklahoma, the Dust Bowl, trying to seal all the openings from the heavy black night rolling toward me in the middle of the afternoon. Meanwhile, the foothills of the Adirondacks where often the snow-buried cars, farm equipment, old roads, and the woods. I thought my life was inadequate to poetry, and my mind along with it. So often I tried to be Eliot, Pound, all those revered at the time as masters. And I would despair, because nothing I wrote sounded as beautiful or profound as the foothills of the Adirondacks, the word foothills alone like its own little poem, hidden in the shadow of the mountains, which, as I drove over them to visit my sister in Vermont, seemed to taunt me with their permanence, until slowly the need to redeem as my own the words of others became less desperate, and even the shadows spoke. Yeah. Well, I love that, the foothills alone, like its own little poem. And it's so true, yeah. And there's a love of language. If you love language, you love poetry. I think all the poets here we've seen today love language, which is wonderful, as always, to see, keeping poetry alive, as Lynn Knight does too. Now, let's say that's going to wrap up the critique of the week. I should say the Poetry Space just came out. That Friday show, Katie produces it, Katie Dozier. And I co-host. We had a wonderful guest on talking about hosting poetry readings and whatnot. That was Rick Lupert, who does the Cobalt Cafe, a really long-standing, it's been going on for like 30 or 40 years, 50 years, maybe, I don't know how long, in Southern California. And Rick's one of the best hosts of poetry readings I've known. So we talk all about that on today's episode of the Poetry Space, which just came out. You should start your own poetry reading series wherever you are too, or online. Let's see, then on the Rattlecast coming up on Monday, the guest is going to be right here. No, that was this week's guest. Al was great last week, but this week's guest is Crystal Simone Smith. Crystal is the president of the Haiku Society of America. That's the organization that publishes Frog Pond, perhaps the best haiku journal. She's also won a Touchstone Award for a book of haiku and other Japanese form poems. Her most recent book is Runagate. She also has a book of erasure poems that should be fascinating. We're going to look at some of that. So it's going to be some haiku, really culturally interested haiku especially, and also some blackout poems. And that's going to be the guest, Crystal Simone Smith, Radicus number 315. And the prompt, sorry, I forgot to say, the prompt for this week is to write a poem that influences the music. Write a poem about the influence music has had on you over the years while making the poem itself as musical as possible. So, musical poetry about music is the prompt for this week. Your guest, Crystal Simone Smith, back to the regular time, Monday, October 27th, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great weekend in the meantime, and we'll talk to you later. Goodbye.